So Judy, I'm over in the community hall because we've got the model here, and if we wanted to talk about looks and things.
Oh, that's a great idea, David. Thank you so much. I was wondering why you were there. I thought there might be something wrong with your internet at home or something.
No,
I think particularly helpful is the comparison model that Dick made with the scale model of the library.
Yeah, I have that alongside a sort of a layer cake utility building where you can pull out a foot here or pull out a foot there.
Well, Tim is joining us, right?
Tim is supposed to be on this call, and Dick has left for the day, but he's supposed to be on this call. So I don't know whether he's back in Augusta by now. I presume he is.
Okay.
And Billy's here in the office.
Okay.
While I'm out here in the room.
And you don't have your bottom strap on your mask.
But my mask fits really close to my face.
Okay. I figure if anyone knows how to wear a mask properly, it would be a surgeon.
Well, surgeons have it's probably more important for surgeons not to have their glasses fogged than to worry about whether the air is venting out backwards.
Yeah, the oops. the old Bill Cosby. Oops.
All right, bye.
So how's everybody holding up?
Our office is we spent a lot of time today talking about our plan for reentry here. And I think that June 1st is when we are all going to be able to go back in full time. And I think everybody's beginning to appreciate the office more than they did.
Yeah. Well, there's a kind of, there's only so much TV you can binge watch. And then you kind of want to get
Report from Florida, if you're interested.
Say it again, what?
Report from Florida.
What's Florida like?
We're all sweltering down here. Unusually warm and humid weather this winter season. Can't wait to get back to a little snow and burning the wood stove.
I think
it looks like you might have some tomorrow.
Ed?
Yes.
It's supposed to snow here this weekend.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
I'll believe it when I see it, but I'm sure that they'll get snow in inland Maine. Well, there's lots of mulch on your rose beds. Someone came and did a whole bunch of work on your plantings out there.
Yes. Thank you.
And someone was here today drilling things into my oak trees.
Thank you for the report. We are planning to return in a couple of weeks, or actually next week. But the airline flights are very much up in the air down here. The airline we're flying is Allegiant Airlines, and they're canceling maybe 75% of their flights. So it's questionable whether we will take off the day we're supposed to take off.
I suppose you could drive up and sleep in the car. I don't know whether motels are open.
That's what our next door neighbor just did. That's what he's going to do. He's going to drive 13 hours one day to go to Michigan, stay in his car overnight, and drive like 8 hours the next day to get back home.
Well, I suppose that Walmart still lets you park in their parking lot, even if they. That's what all the RVs used to do, because they actually could do plug-ins in the Walmart parking lot.
I don't think I'd want to sleep in the car.
Yeah, well,
hey, David, I have 232, and I think I see Tim, and I think all the trustees are here.
Okay, so I hadn't looked at all the other
and
people.
Richard.
So Mike's
Richard,
here.
is that you? Is that Dick?
Tim Stautel, and this must be Dick on his iPhone.
Dick, put on your speaker so that we can tell if you hear us.
I can hear you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, well, Nina sent out a set of minutes. I found them a little bit of the telegraph use was a little bit hard to understand. And I might, because they're sent out as they're not sent out as Word documents, so I can't, make a proposed amendment to them sometimes. But if you went down to the bottom of the first page, it says there's a lengthy discussion initiated by Mike Lannon regarding the bid that has been sent out, the fact that it was not finalized. I would argue with the putting the word fact in there. He states that it was not finalized before being sent out. And he states that the previous meeting, and it is stated, it doesn't say by whom, that the previous meeting they agreed to have Richard McElhenney proofread it and then send it out. Mike Lannon states there was not enough public input on the building. So it's a question of who states that there was not enough public input on the building. And then under the next bullet point, it says, there are items that are not in the design that will be added, changed, including wooden steps instead of concrete, possible ladders. These items are not in the plans because it is anticipated they will be completed by volunteers. I would have added a sentence that said, items have been changed in response to public input because that in fact was the case. And then under my comments, under the public comments, at the public meeting, a Bayside cottage was discussed. I would say that a design like a Bayside cottage was discussed, but the committee felt that the height would have been too much, leading to a decision by the committee for more yacht club roof design. So those are changes that I would propose to the minutes. I don't know whether Nina got all of that, but with those changes, I would move to accept the minutes.
I'd second the motion, but Nina had her hand up.
Nina.
I have been asked to not add that kind of detail to minutes specifically. So if the minutes need, you can email me at any time. John does, asking me questions about the minutes. There's to ask for clarification or for me to reword them before they're sent out as finalized.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, I probably, Judy.
I was going to say that couple things. It might be helpful if Nina, if she sends them as a PDF, I'm sure that she would accept handwritten changes on the PDF in advance to make this easier. I agree with Nina that she's been, there's no way that minutes they're not a transcription, and we have a recording of the documents. So there's no way we can properly balance what everybody says. So discussion was had is probably the best anyone can do. The third thing I was going to say is that there was one note about the billing where it said we'd received a call from a customer, and I would have suggested that the word be comment from a customer on the rates increase for sewers, because we had received calls and written communications, not just a call, but all from the same customer. So that would have been my recommendation for a change, for that clarification.
Okay. Does anybody object to the minutes in that fashion? All in favor of accepting the minutes? All opposed? Mike, you're opposed. I asked whether there was any comment about why you would not accept them. I can't hear you. Unmute.
No, I'm willing to move past it. I
Okay.
don't agree with that, but I'm willing to move forward because we need to get this figured out.
Okay. Okay. excuse me, I used to have these things organized, what we were going to be talking about here. If we go, we're going to get to the building. I think that's going to be the last thing we have to deal with. I thought we should go to the, are there visitors who are going to have concerns? And if so, would they mention what they would like to talk about? We won't necessarily take the comments now, but at the appropriate time. Okay. The superintendent's report, everybody got a copy of the superintendent's report? Okay. I have been through it. Amongst the exceptional things, we are going to need to talk about the kerosene spills. And if someone would like me to bring them up to date on where we are now, I would be happy to do that. Basically, about 2.5 or 3 weeks ago, we were pumping out train number 3. And in the first chamber of train number 3, which we've used all winter, we found a large amount of red-colored kerosene floating in the tank. And so we notified the DEP and the state oil cleanup people, and we arranged for Clean Harbors, who deals with oil products, to come and pump out that tank. And that happened over about 2 weeks. And we got our train 3 completely cleaned out, and we shifted over to trains 1 and 2 for summer. And almost 4 days ago, must have been Janae and probably Ed Lord, but people over on Park Row smelled kerosene. They called both the fire department and Billy. Billy was out pulling manholes. We found kerosene pouring once again, now into trains 1 and 2, not train 3. And it turned out, as Billy followed it up the hill to where it was coming from, there was a house in Auditorium Park, I believe it's 12 Auditorium Park, had kerosene in their basement, and they had a ticket in the door that day Tidewater had delivered 100 gallons of oil to their outdoor kerosene tank, and the kerosene tank was empty. So somehow the 100 gallons that were put into their tank found their way, much of it fairly directly, into our system. Since that time, the DEP has been over. They have pumped oil and water out of the basement at 12 Auditorium Park. They have investigated it the best they could and could not find a direct hookup to our collection pipes. Although there are questions about building drains around the building. The leak was into the ground just outside the wall, and it went into their basement. We don't have evidence of a sump pump pumping directly into our sewer system, but there is undoubtedly a connection. This house is going to shift over from kerosene to propane, so I don't think we have to worry about them leaking more kerosene into our system, although they may be a source of inflow that we have not found before. And when it rains, we may continue to get inflow from it. At any rate, the DEP has indicated that they have insurance funds that are going to cover the costs of each time we pumped out our tanks. It was probably, a bill in the range of $10,000, which isn't in our budget. So it's, it's a huge expense.
Well, I think Dick has updates as to that, and I think they're mostly positive. So Dick, maybe you can, your report touches upon the contributions.
Yeah, Nina Caputo of the Bureau of Oil and Hazardous Waste did indicate that the DEP, with this water cleanup and response fund, would pay for the mitigation costs of the cleanup of the tanks at the wastewater treatment plant. So They also, that fund will pay for the cleanup costs also, for the homeowner too, as well, as it turns out. So that was the good news of all of this.
And because they're not going to be using kerosene anymore, at least that source will not continue to be something that's going
Right.
to.
And they did condemn the tank and had that removed. Turned out it was in fact a dual walled tank, but somehow water had got in between the inner and outer tank, the interstitial space, and so consequently that's why they condemned the tank. And again, as David said, the owners are going to convert over to propane.
Okay. Did you want to talk, Dick, about the nitrate and nitrite testing that we did?
Well, yeah, if you want me to, that's something that we have to do annually on the water side of things. And both nitrate and nitrite were well below the, what they call the MCL, or maximum contaminant levels. So
right. And
we wouldn't expect anything different.
And we dug up a section of Lower Main Street for a water leak. Matt Brown came over with Billy, and they found an area of the pipe that was split and repaired.
Yeah, they put a repair clamp on, and it was just a couple of inches up from where a repair clamp was put on. Actually, no, they spliced a piece of plastic pipe in place of that old repair, as opposed to putting a repair clamp on. That's what they did. But it was within inches of where the old repair clamp had been made on this line. So we'll have to monitor that and maybe plan on replacing that section down the road if it becomes a continuing problem.
Okay, and then the last thing on your report was the Consumer Confidence and Water Quality Report. A copy will be provided for the website. Hard copies are available for handout at the Northport Community Hall, but nobody's going to be able to get them.
Right.
And they were, how are we arranging to post things on the community bulletin boards these days?
Well, we're just going to have to tack them up there. I basically told the drinking water program that we would try to post the report on Dan Webster's site. We'd make available hard copies in the office when that office reopens, as well as posting these CCR reports on the, I guess there's 6 bulletin boards throughout the village.
Right.
For people to see.
Okay, I think that will probably do it for the superintendent's report. Financials, you all received a copy of the utility billing recap. We don't have other financials, I don't believe. I would say our collections are a little less good than they ordinarily are this long after a billing. We have $11,000 in water charges that are still outstanding and $9,000 in sewer charges that are still outstanding. There's 7 NVC accounts that haven't been paid yet. And obviously that changes from week to week, and Amy will keep us up to it, but it sounds like it's not quite as good collections as we usually have by this time. And I don't want to, does anybody else want to comment on that at all?
I had a question for Nina on that. Nina, I think that you had reported to us that you were looking at direct deposit opportunities.
I did have an email from them, and I've sent an email as follow-up and haven't heard back yet. Let me see here.
Okay, thank you.
And, I'm trying to follow up because it zeroes out the expenses that they would charge, the fees. But I'm asking if they're just zero for this year and then they're further down in other years, because I need to know that before I make a recommendation as to like, oh, sure, it's free. And then they come back and they say, no, it was only free for 1 year. So I'm just waiting for the answer for that.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you
I
very
think
much.
it's free for just, if I can interrupt, I think it's just free for a few months, until this pandemic washes out, if it ever does. And otherwise, it's something like $1,000 a month to provide that service. 12,000 a year. Or maybe, you know, well, maybe not. Maybe it could be less since we bill trimesterally and not monthly. So it could be less.
Okay. Well, I would say at that point, we're moved on to dealing with the bid and the bid we received and what our next steps are going to be. And Mike sent out what I thought was a useful list of things to consider. I think from 1 to 7, having to deal with what we thought about this bid. Everybody has also received a copy of what the how Apex arrived at their bid. I think most of us were left a little slack-jawed by what we saw. So I guess my first question is, can we accept this bid as it stands? Judy?
Yeah, sorry, I was just, I would like to hear from Tim before we pose questions like that. I'd like to know his response, his recommendations, his thoughts on the breakdown we saw, the process, what I'd like to hear from him. He's the professional. Okay. He knows what he's doing, and I'd like to hear all of those things before we answer, before people like me chime in.
Okay, Tim, you're on.
Sure. I guess one thing I want to point out that this schedule that we got from Apex is a schedule of values, not necessarily the prices they added all up when they got their bid. You notice everything is rounded off to the nearest $100 or even $500 amount. So what happened here? Oh, someone's putting stuff on the screen, I guess. Apparently.
Yeah, Mike is.
Yeah, you confused me there for a second. So anyway, that
Sorry, I was trying to help.
Yeah, that's good. I just didn't know it was coming. I thought it was on my end. So I mean, yes, hopefully this does match roughly how he priced it out. But he divvies stuff up to at the end. You know, when I ask for a schedule of values, normally this is how you would pay them on a lump sum job. Is after you just have one price, but then you've got to figure out how you're going to pay them as they go along. The numbers are very high. He still was a low bidder, low and only, but or maybe another way to look at it is the low bidder didn't bid our job. I could very well see us rebidding this. I just don't know who else we're going to entice that has an interest in doing it. All the contractors that we work with have a backlog. This pandemic really hasn't impacted them as far as, losing work or needing work. So they're just as busy as ever. So if we want a lower number, we need to go about it another way, either try to be our own general or perhaps, finding a smaller local contractor who you think can handle it if he gets the right subs involved.
So how do you deal with smaller local contractors?
Well, you'd have to find maybe someone in the building trades that knew how to deal with coordinate the building parts. Someone in the building trades, not necessarily the treatment plant business, would know how to deal with a concrete contractor, the building sub, electrical sub, mechanical sub. The contractors are good at coordinating subs if they're going to be successful. You are a public entity, so you do need to, if the job's going to cost more than $125,000 by state statute, you have to have a payment and performance bond. So that kind of weeds out the small contractors from doing the work. But you know, I don't know. I don't know if you have anybody else in mind. We send it to all the contractors that we typically see bid our jobs. And
Mhm.
none of them except one were really interested. Judy.
So I'm interested in your comments that you don't perceive, based on the other work that you've been doing and your knowledge of the industry, that the pandemic deflated interest in this opportunity.
I don't think interest in this job had anything to do with the pandemic. I'm just saying the contractors are all just as busy this year as they were 6 months ago.
Okay. I guess I have two other questions. I think that you probably didn't see the emails, Tim, but there were emails reacting to this list where people in particular saw the electrical line as crazy, 65,000. Does that strike you as a crazy line? Could it be a typo?
No, I don't think it's a typo, but yeah, it is a pretty high number.
Okay.
But, you know, when you only have one bidder,
Mhm.
you know, sometimes, I mean, that could be part of it. You know, they get an inkling that maybe they're the only one, or that there's, you know, I don't know.
No.
And the other line that struck me as something that we could probably look more specifically at the specs on was the site prep. Since we have some overlap there, maybe, I don't know if we do, because of the seawall site work.
Right. I believe he carried a number from Farley.
That's right. Farley was going to be his sub, right?
Right. And is Farley one of your contractors on the seawall?
They are the assigned contractor.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's, you know, if it does go this way, that's good because it eliminates coordination issues maybe. Farley can't claim that Farley's messing him up, but, you know, he's already got the seawall contractor, you know, as involved as his site work sub. So I don't know how that also looks like a relatively high number, but that's the number he got from Farley.
So do we have an opportunity? I throw this out to people like you who know what you're doing. Mike has had experience with this. I'm sure others, I'm not sure if Miles or David has had experience with this. Do we have an opportunity to go to Apex and say, your electrical line looks crazy, rethink that? And your site prep line is going to be done by the very person who's getting paid to do site prep under another contract. Get rid of that. Do we have that power? I mean, we obviously have the right, but
yeah,
is
you
it
can.
productive?
Yeah, and Jeff Todd, that's the owner of Apex. He would talk to us about any of those things. I've already had some discussion with him about the possibility of some changes. That he would come up with a proposal if he knew what direction you wanted him to go in. I think I had what I do with my notes. Now I'm somehow that slipped through the cracks. There were a couple things we talked. I don't think he thinks we can get much lower than in the low, you know, 2.25 range or 230, 240, something like that. He was talking about eliminating a couple of site work items. I really can't recall what the other items were we thrashed around. But he certainly could go back and ask another electrician. I know the electrician he carried is one he works with a lot, but doesn't mean he couldn't try to find another one.
So I know I'm monopolizing the conversation and I don't mean to. I'm hope that I'm asking questions that people are thinking. Since this number is nearly twice the number we had, where did we or they go wrong? That's what I need to know. How is it that we had 120, which we had already extrapolated to anywhere from 160 to 200, and now we're at 280? Where did we mess up? Where did we forget something?
Well, if you look at the schedule of values like you've got in front of you here, and you start putting numbers in any of these, you would never write down numbers of this magnitude. You know, you'd think you'd be laughed, 25 grand for the concrete. I think the 120 number is a little on the light side, but when you look at the breakdown that we had when we came up with that, it doesn't look bad. But obviously we had a number more like 10 or 12 grand for the concrete, not 25 grand.
Right.
These are all double. I wouldn't have been shocked if this building had been pushing 200.
Right. We had been saying 160 to 200.
Yeah, that's roughly, so if it had been in that range, plus or minus, wouldn't have shocked me anyway. But this is a very high number.
So I guess then my bottom line question is, what would you recommend we do?
Well, your choices include rebidding or just negotiating. If you negotiate, you're not going to get down probably below 230, 240. But when you negotiate, they're not going to keep this scope and give you a lower number. They're going to reduce this scope, so you're going to get less stuff or cheaper stuff. You don't get the same job and just pay a lower number. They'll have to take stuff out, or possibly, if they could find a cheaper electrical sub, then possibly you can save some there, without changing the scope. But you're not going to see a major reduction if you stay with Apex.
Okay.
And I've seen jobs rebid, and you don't get as good a number the second time around.
Yeah, like taking the SATs twice.
Right.
Like you already have your 1600 to be happy.
What happens if you rebid and you include 4 or 5 local general contractors?
Well, but you did that. You mailed out to particular people, right?
Right. We invited, if you will, sent the bid advertisement to Apex Construction, Penta Corporation, T-Buck Construction, Moulton Construction, Sargent Corporation, Farley, and Gordon Contractors, or Gordon Construction, or whatever they're called. So what's that, 7? And only really had interest from one, Apex. Farley, of course, did, the site work part, but.
Yeah. I'm just, it's not passing the straight face test. The bid itself doesn't pass the straight face test in any way, and I don't see how we can accept the bid. If we rebid, we may need to look at a different set of people that we send an advertisement out to. And, there are people around here building all the time, and almost everybody who's a general contractor here gets their foundation poured, gets their cement poured, finds someone to do the excavation, builds the building, or finds someone to build the building. I can't comprehend it costing this much. Judy.
So Tim, what talent pool do we leave on the table if we approach general contractors as opposed to wastewater plant contractors?
Well, by that you mean building type
Right.
In this job, probably not a lot. I mean, they might just need to get a mechanical guy that but there's really not much mechanical here, you know?
Well, that's why we
Uh,
were reacting to the 65,000.
Yeah.
Electrical.
I don't know that you give up a lot on this particular job. It's just that they don't often cross over on their own. You know, we have had Bowman Construction is one that comes to mind out of Newport
Yep. they've
that
got
does,
a-
that does schools and those kind of, that has done 1 or 2 wastewater projects for us over the years. Trying to think of other building, there's been a few other times when building contractors, Blaine, I guess those are public works garages, so that's just a building job anyway. So.
Mike, you.
Yes, Tim, I was wondering, do you feel that we have satisfied sort of a good faith effort at public bidding at this point and could possibly negotiate with somebody, given that we bid it once, we didn't really get something that we thought was well within what you had estimated as an engineering number. 2, it's during this strange time that we have with COVID and everything else. And 3, that we have a deadline coming up for the EPA. Do you think we could possibly negotiate with somebody, like, for example, ask Farley what it would be to add it to his contract or something along those lines?
Well, I'm not sure what the Village Corporation has for rules and requirements, but yeah, you've asked 7 contractors that are, if you look at any wastewater job of this type in Maine, they would most of the time be on the list. So, and only one of them responded. I think you've made a pretty good effort at it. Not that there might not be somebody else.
Mhm.
Jim has got his hand up here.
A couple meetings ago, Mike had presented, I thought was a pretty darn good alternative to the issues that had got brought up at the time about the size and height of the building. Could we go back to the existing bidder and say, can you rebid based on this drawing type thing, and as well as what Mike had just brought up? Because I think part of the cost overrun on this bid we received was the building was pretty grand relative to what I think is basically needed.
David?
We could certainly have that discussion at some point. I guess what I would say is that although issues of height can be addressed with some success, I think that we can cut some height out of the building. Completely redesigning the plant is not something that I want to get into right now. And to my mind, that implies all of the base of the plant. The base of the plant is designed. What you do with the walls, what you do with the roof might save you some squares of shingles, might save you some wood. But this is not a grand building. It's a 9 by 12 building. That's what's astonishing. This is a very simple building. And I don't think that there's a huge amount of money to be saved in how you build a building. I could go down to Shed City and they could make you a building that would look like what you want for $10,000 to $15,000 delivered, and plunk it on top of the cement base. So the building is not grandiose in other than, the engineering designs of the base of the building are complex. The shape and the height of the building are slightly negotiable, and but I don't think we should be redesigning the building, is my opinion. Judy.
I like what Mike has suggested, which is that we've satisfied our good faith obligations to find someone who will do this for a reasonable price. And so I like going to, you've mentioned, I think you just said Bowman, and I think I've heard of them. They're good. They're probably too expensive as well. Going to Farley actually reaching out and negotiating a contract on the design we have. I think if we all look at this I guess I wouldn't even call it an itemization that we have from Apex, we'll see the building itself is not the thing that's driving the cost. It's the things that have to do with the mechanicals. Again, I'll come back to the $65,000 for electrical. Your Shed City example, David, is all well and good, but it's the timber is not what's driving the cost here. It's the things we need to make this a wastewater treatment plant. Mm-hmm. I also appreciate the effort and time that Mike put into the alternative that he laid out. But as Tim pointed out on several emails over the last, I think 7 days or so, we have the floodplain issues we have to deal with. We have the heights of the wall. We can talk about a cathedral ceiling, as you just mentioned, David. But we have this design from our engineers, who we've paid, with all due respect, Tim, a lot of money to get it right. So I think going back to the drawing board is not what we want to do. I really like what Mike has said about going to people we trust, like Farley. Farley had an opportunity to bid. They chose not to, but maybe if they, well, they did as a sub, but maybe if they know they're the only game in town, they can look more concretely at these numbers for us.
Can Farley act as a general contractor and sub out the parts they're not comfortable doing?
That would be for them to decide, but I couldn't speak for them.
Is that a reasonable thing to ask of a company that does excavations and so on?
Miles,
yeah, it is. The only issue is they, as long as they're comfortable, if for them in the job, let's say that there is $40,000 worth of work. If the whole job was, pull a number out of thin air, if the job was 200, then they're a minority share of it, but they get all the headaches at the end of the job. So that's one thing the contractors don't like about being the general. If you're only a small piece of the pie, has its drawbacks. Mm-hmm. I think Miles has his hand up.
Yeah, I need some clarification here. I think, Judy, you can probably give it to me. If we don't meet the deadline, what are the real life consequences? And then in terms of permitting, because it seems to me we probably can get an extension of the permitting, given all of the circumstances. This bid is nuts. I mean, this is a 9-by-12 building, and it may take some time, plus I'm aware of Mike's concerns, which also add to the time. So I'm wondering, can we just move more slowly with this thing?
Well, that was one of the questions that Mike posed in the outline of things we should be talking about here. You'll recall, Miles, that when this license requirement came in, it was conditioned upon us starting the year-round treatment immediately. And so this is already an extension of almost 2 years from that point. I don't have any psychological background to figure out if the EPA is going to take into consideration a further request for extension. I certainly think it's worth asking the question in a cogent fashion. I think our good faith in trying to get this done in a timely way has clearly been demonstrated. And I do think it's something that we should at least ask. I would lean on Dick, you're the one that engaged in the negotiations to get the extension. You have a good relationship with the people at the EPA and the DEP. Have you talked with them at all about this number that came across our desk that surprised us all?
I haven't, no.
I certainly think that's something we should be asking. I don't think it's an invitation to reset the design bar. I want to retain the value of what we've already accomplished.
They've been very reasonable to work with. If we have legitimate, justified reasons for asking more time, I think they'd consider it. But if we tell them that we need more time because we didn't like the bid, or the bid was too high, or we can't afford it, you know, that might not be a good justification for asking for more time to find maybe a lower bidder, or to redesign, you know, the building project. So, but I, you know, I think, you know, if it was based on some good justification as to why we needed extra time, you know, I think they certainly would listen.
Well, and that's why I think that Tim's comment about the pandemic itself doesn't seem to be deflating interest in contract projects. I mean, they're all essential businesses. They're all open. We can't say, gosh golly, here's this pandemic that's gotten everybody's way.
Right. I think the more legitimate justification would be that we just didn't get good bids or enough bids, and because everybody is so busy right now, and that we perhaps need more time to, you know, to rebid this. But I'll be, you know, we'll be sending out we have to send out semi-annual progress reports every 6 months, and the next one is due June 1st. And so, you know, I'll be writing the progress report. So if people have anything that they want to give to me that I can incorporate into the letter to justify an extension, we kind of addressed that in the first progress report by saying that this was what's happening now is exactly, you know, what our concern was then. You know, that everybody is so busy that we might not be getting, you know, good bids. So, you know, we can certainly add to that.
I have a question, maybe Mike can help answer this. We know Farley's going to be on site after the middle of September here working on the seawall. So we know they're going to be here, which is different from going out and just asking any general contractor to take on a project where they're not here. I mean, it would seem logical to me if they feel comfortable doing the excavation and the foundation and building the base of the building and putting in the conduits. What they might not feel as comfortable doing the hookups to the tanks, but I can't think that that's going to be that big a problem. We're going to be burying utilities and pipes, and we're going to be, you know, putting a hatch on a manhole. It would seem to me that all of that falls within what they're comfortable doing. And then the next question is, if they're not comfortable building the building, would they be willing to go to any local contractor around here and ask them to build the building? I guess that was a question for Mike or for anybody.
Mike stepped away, he got a phone call. But I guess I'll try to answer it by instead rephrasing it and saying, I think we've already developed a three-legged stool for response here, which I think's, I like how it's coming together. One is we have the report due to EPA and DEP about where we stand, and we incorporate, that's due in 2 weeks. We incorporate into that a real-time reality check for all of us and say, where do you, how much leeway will you give us? Can we renegotiate these deadlines? At the same time, we should be talking, and I would suggest that it be David or Dick and Tim, certainly Tim and Dick, with Farley, and asking them that question. And then thirdly, I would be asking Tim to look at his design one more time and see if there's elements that can be peeled back that will save some money. I don't see where they are. We worked very hard on a stripped down plan here, and we came up with a $280,000 building. I think at that same time that one of the abiding questions that you've been working on since November, Tim, is this building needs to be as low as possible. And David has come up with the idea of the cathedral ceiling. Can we do that? I think if we can accomplish those three things in the next couple weeks, we will have moved ourselves down the road a little bit more. Mike, David walked away.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to jump on a call there for a second, but I just heard you talk about the cathedral ceiling and stuff, and I was just wondering if we were also going to consider the gates in front of the doors. And I saw some emails this week about the flood zone classification. And I tried to go through the specs and stuff and try to figure out exactly what zone we're in. And I wasn't sure, so I guess it's really just a question for Tim. Are we in a VE or an AE?
We are in the VE. It's right on the firm, the FEMA map. Penobscot Bay up there in the Northport, Belfast area is all VE. So, I mean, to me, it's a good idea. Put the floor lower and have a flood-proof door, but it's not allowed.
Okay.
Because you're in zone VE, so you're not allowed to have your lowest floor elevation below the base flood elevation, regardless of any flood-proofing technique employed.
Yeah. I guess I wasn't sure where the VE ended in our park. And when I looked at the maps, and again, you're the engineer here on this, so I'm not trying to say I know exactly what we're talking about here. But the floodgate guy sent me the firm for this area, and I'll just share it for a second here. And obviously it's, I have to get rid of the other one. No, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Where did it go?
Yeah, can you zoom out on that a little bit for us?
Yeah.
Just above, you can see where the dock sticks out there. So just beyond, ooh.
What's that?
Where'd he come from?
That was Rosie.
That was Rosie, yeah. So here, this is what we were looking at, right?
Yeah.
Can you see it now?
No, you just needed to go out a little bit.
On the original one you had that was blown up, if you could blow it up more.
Let me start over here.
Yeah.
Sorry. Let me start one more time. Share the screen and then share this one. Can you see that?
Yes. Yeah, but you've gone in instead of out. But if you look at if you were to back out a little bit, it is labeled zone VE just to the north. Yeah. So continue panning so that we see we're going north.
Is that good?
Yeah, a little more. Keep going. Yeah, there you go. Now drag it. Yeah, drag it down. Drag the cursor down so that we see further to the north.
Of the north?
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Right there.
Zone VE, right?
Yep.
So that's up to the blue line, right?
Yep. And then if you go further south, it's quite a ways further south, but it's designated VE, and that's all the way to the blue line. That's right.
Right. And that's to the blue line. So I guess I was wondering if when we pulled the building forward, if we were outside of the blue line.
No, I don't think so. Not especially if you look. And if you look, right there. See what?
I'm sorry. I thought we were done.
But right there to the left, where it's also labeled just outside the margin, it says Zone VE. Yeah, see, right in the upper left-hand corner, Zone VE elevation 14.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And
that's right where we are.
And what are we? 12 out for ground now. So you're in it. Actually, Zone VE is higher in elevation further south, but we got a little protection behind. They lower it a little bit in that range.
But inside of the blue dotted area to the left of it, isn't that AE?
Nope.
I mean, doesn't the blue is the limits of the VE, right?
Right.
So if we had the building, because my question is because I thought, and again, this is a question for you. I'm just trying to figure it out. But I thought, I'm not a structural guy, so, but I thought in VEs, like in the town's floodplain stuff, if you're in the VE, you have to have breakaway. I mean, we have to be above the floodplain so that all the water can flow underneath through the piers. Like, and is that it? So it seems like that's why I thought we were outside of the VE. I know we're right near it, but we were outside of it in the AE because we don't have a breakaway foundation thing that can be ripped out during the waves.
Yeah, well, we're hoping that we're small enough and rugged enough. We'll have to. I mean, the building that you have has stood there. Of course, we may have the 200-year flood this year, you know, or next year. But yeah, the preference is that you have you know, a way for the water to flow through your basement,
Right.
or around, or, you know, obviously you have to have something that stays in it. But we're not very big. Obviously, if you start taking waves into the building itself, you may find that still is damaged.
Right.
Yeah, depending on what stage of tide or storm surge we're at.
Because if I go to the Northport village, the town of Northport's flood code, that's what this is here. And this says that if we're in the VE here, zone VE, then we have to do all these things where we're up on piers and stuff. And I don't know how, unless there's a way that you can sign off on that with not having to do it. Is that something you can do? When you fill out that form, that firm form? Yeah.
Yeah, which we've already done, and we're submitting it with, you know, with the building that's there, structurally sound to stand. Not the building, the foundation certainly.
Right.
That foundation will be there.
Right, because
you know, whether the building will stand if you're actually taking waves into that or not, that's anybody's guess.
yeah, but the way I read this, and again, maybe I'm wrong, but this is the area at up to the 1 foot above the floodplain is what has to be able to withstand this, right?
Right.
Because in theory, it's not going to go above that according to this.
So when you designed it, Tim, you designed it with a understanding, and this isn't the first time you've done something in the floodplain, with an understanding as to what is required, and you also conferred with the town, correct?
Right. And we've sent along to you the flood application, which I guess you're waiting on until you know who your contractor is or whatever.
Right. So you're saying we don't have to do this A and B thing in the VE?
Yeah, in our opinion, doesn't mean that those that review it don't come back and disagree with us.
Well, you're the one signing the form, so you can do what you like there.
That
I just wanted to,
one of the questions I had, Tim, was the timeline for the turnaround. What are we were talking about making sure this is done by December 31st, moving backwards. How much time should we reasonably expect for Tupi to react to give us the permit we need, and for the contract to be in place with the contractor, assuming we can get Farley or somebody, or even Apex, although nobody's really excited about Apex right now.
Yeah, I don't know that I would change your schedule anyway. From what it currently is, you want to get started in whatever it was.
September 14th.
We had a date called out in there after something happened there in early in September. Wanted the concrete done by early in October, if I remember correctly.
Yep. And
then we had I could look up what the dates are, but it was early in middle December or whatever to be online. I wouldn't change those at all. That gives you between now and, you know, sometime in August to get somebody lined up and get them going.
Yeah. Okay. So David just put the model of the building up.
Did you make that one, David?
No. Dick Brockway did this.
Brockway.
So this looks to me like it's reversed left from right for you guys. But nevertheless, this is the one that Brockway did. This is with the standard roof. This is taking a foot off the standard roof for height, although I worry that with any sort of wind, it's going to blow the wind and the rain right in under those shingles and the building's going to leak. You know, I think we need some pitch to the roof. But at any rate, if you have that, which is setting up on its pedestal and which is tall, I agree. If you take a foot off, this is the layer cake approach to it.
But
You
how do
said
we
about
take
that.
the foot off? Tim, can we take the foot off?
Well, we have drawn it with an 8-foot ceiling height.
Right.
We can go to 7 with a ceiling height. What's in the way? Well, you're just getting a little close to your door there.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
I guess we could, what do we have? A standard height door? You can get a door a few inches shorter.
You had said that you chose the door width because of the angling of the equipment in?
Well, yeah, the door was chosen so that you could get that tank in and out of there if you ever had to.
Right, so that was the height that you had told us when we met in on March 13th, when we were finalizing all the specs, that the design, that it was the smallest height and diagonal of the door possible to get the tank in and out once we have to.
Yeah, you could probably squeeze it a little bit if you had to, but I mean, we have seen buildings what we worked on. They opted to have the tank go in and then they closed it in. So if it ever has to come out, you know, you take a Sawzall and you slice her up, and then you got to cut a hole in the wall to replace it.
Yeah.
But there are smaller, there are square tanks that can fit through individual doors, but to put the volume in there that we want, we'd have to have a bank of them, you know, 2 or 3 tanks.
Yeah.
The bulk, what are they called? Intermediate bulk delivery containers that you buy your chemical in, I believe, a 275 gallon. So if we have the minimum, you know, you're not going to, you want to have enough room to not run low on chlorine before you order another load and have room for it in your tanks. I can look at an alternative on different tank shapes. So we could try a different door, or we can look at making the door a few inches shorter. Frame could be cut back and maybe the door could be made 4 or 6 inches shorter.
If you came down 4 to 6 inches on the door, you could take another half foot off the building. If you didn't have a drop ceiling.
Right. But
Well, why don't we just do that? I can't, if we can do it, we should do it. Our mandate has always been as low as possible. What's it going to take?
we don't want to, yeah, we can come down with the current tank, you could come down a foot.
Easily.
It'll be a little tight, but it'll probably work.
Okay.
And the OSHA would allow a 7-foot high ceiling for worker space?
I don't know. I don't see why not, but I don't remember reading about ceiling, you know, it's, people aren't 7 feet tall, you know, normal people anyway. If you are, you're a lot wealthier.
Nothing normal about it.
You're a lot wealthier if you're over 7 feet tall. As long as you can run and jump.
With the peak, is this a peak ceiling?
Gable. Yeah, you can do a.
So is it going to be more than 7 in the middle?
You're only going to gain 6 inches though, Mike.
Like that. So I didn't understand. Mike's question was, is it 7 feet at the peak or is it 7 feet at the sides? And then you get more in the middle.
No, you'd go 7 feet at the sides.
Yeah, okay.
And you'd have more in the middle if you went with a scissor truss, I think is what
David.
you're talking about. David's talking about, right?
Yeah.
Was that good? Is that good enough for like the hurricane stuff you're worried about? Or
Oh, I think so.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what will it take for us to tell you to shorten the building, as you just said?
That's pretty minor. If that's what you want to do, that's a very easy. That may just be a few notes. I don't think there's anything else that gets in the way. I just take a quick look to make sure nothing
Right,
else
stuff on the
is,
wall. We had all the equipment on the walls.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, we do have an interior wall elevation that shows everything that's mounted on the outside walls. And
Right.
the only thing impacted at all was the door.
So did you do a wave analysis on the door facing the bay, or?
No, it did not.
When we
Okay.
talked about that at length on January 31st, I think we relied upon Bill and Fernie's daily observations as to the winds there and the waves. And that's why we ultimately moved the door to what I'm going to call the northwest side,
west side.
the west side.
Oh yeah,
Because
I was
we
talking.
originally were having it at the facing the yacht club was, I think, everybody's first instincts. But Billy and Fernie and David were quite persuasive that those doors are going to be ripped off their hinges if we did that.
Right, I was talking about the wall facing, the south facing wall. Has there been a wave analysis done on that? If we're really in the VE zone and we're not going to have the breakaway type design, what can that withstand? Again, I'm not a wave guy, but when we did the seawall, they had some wave people figured out what they would be, and I can probably get that for you if that's helpful.
Well, yeah, I guess it depends on what elevation it goes to. So we're a foot above base flood elevation.
Okay.
And of course that's related to storm surge or storm tide or whatever if we get a tropical storm or hurricane and the eye passes over Bayside at the same time that we're at high tide, we're in trouble.
Yeah, well, we're all in trouble for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you build.
Right.
Well, that's I think the idea behind the breakaway, foundation stuff. But,
Yeah.
Well, so we've, over the last 2.5 weeks, you have been asked specifically both to confirm that we're in the floodplain and to confirm that the floodgates or a sunken floor are not reasonable alternatives. And now the constant battle that we've had with you, Tim, about having as low as possible. You think you can pull that lower?
If you want a 7-foot inside ceiling, yeah, we can do that.
I like that.
And if you want a scissor truss, there's not a real wide. You get a little more in the middle, but
I don't think Fernie's 6 feet tall, and he can walk under the door.
yeah. But I think you got to keep it. You got to keep it 7.
Yeah,
You might get someone who's 6'5".
yeah, there are minimum standards.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the door is whatever the door frame is, 6'8" or whatever.
the 6'4", they have 6'4" and 6'8", right?
Yeah.
So
we can go with a shorter one, and
David, Dick Brockway, for a point of comparison, recently sent up a scale model of the library because when we were all talking about, make it look like Bayside, which we've been talking about from day one, we want, he the other day put this up, and I think the library was measured out by Gordon as 13 feet tall.
13.5.
No, the to the peak 13, and it's 10 by, our building is 12.9, right? So this is 10 by 12 and then 13 at the top. And the building as currently designed by Tim is 14.5, including the 3-foot. So it's 18 inches difference. It's 18 inches taller than the library. But if we pull it down a foot, then it's 6 inches taller than the library and 1 foot narrower because the library is 10 feet. And the shingles are going to replicate the shingles on the yacht club, right? We're going to try to match color.
Yeah. We have not, never mind. I don't think we were planning on staining the shingles. They were going to either be natural color or maybe, I mean, you can have pre-stained shingles that are gray the first year instead of waiting 3 years for them to stop looking raw.
Mhm. When can you, who are people interested in Dick and Tim talking with Farley in particular, or anyone else in particular that anybody has a name? Is that a good plan for next steps?
I mean, I think we probably, should try to negotiate with Apex myself. I mean, I'm looking at this, schedule of values here, for example. And I see a $2,500 charge to unplug the existing sampler and plug it into the outlet of the new building, right? I mean, that makes no sense at all. I mean, we're going to use the existing sampler. We're not purchasing a new sampler. It's just a matter of unplugging it out of the existing building and then plug it into the new building. So should be no expense there. Relocate the pumps, $2,000, for example. Fernie's going to be the one that's going to be, repiping the metering pumps anyway. So that's something that we can do. Pump accessories, we have pump accessories. There's $1,500 charge there. Unnecessary. All of these things that I'm talking about can be zero. The eye wash, $1,500. I mean, we can buy one, a gravity feed eye wash in USA Blue Book for a couple $100. We can install that. The dialer, maybe we want to have a dialer, maybe we don't. Maybe the reason that $65,000 electrical charge is there because in our design, we're talking about running a new line, from the telephone pole up by the yacht club down to the new building. Perhaps that $65,000 basically is so high because of the excavation cost. So, maybe we just tie in to the existing electrical conductors rather than running a whole new line out there if the majority of that expense is due to just, earthwork. And so I didn't see any, I don't know what GCOHP means, but do you know what that means, Tim?
Yeah, that's his overhead and profit.
Profit, yeah.
Oh, okay. But I don't see anything here in relationship to the generator.
Oh, yeah, there is.
Where did I miss something there? Or?
Is it?
The electrical.
It's buried in the electrical. The generator's not a super expensive item.
No, that's probably a $5,000 or $6,000 expense. So that's probably
the ATS, yeah.
$65,000, huh?
Dick, you didn't, because you don't have a camera, you don't see the people's reactions. Miles was, well, now the screen's shared and now I can't see people. But
Wait,
Miles was
I'm
shaking
sorry.
his head.
There you go.
Miles was shaking his head and about the notion of talking to Apex, and Billy was shaking his head over the notion on the electrical, how we can save money there.
Yeah.
I guess I'd like to hear from Miles and Billy on those things, and Miles has walked away though.
Really.
No, I was just shaking my head because we're not using a phone line. This is a cell phone dialer. The way I understand it, right, Tim?
That's correct, yes.
So there's no phone line involved. Like Dick was saying, dig up to run a phone line. We were talking cell phone.
Right.
So Dick said that we ought to go and negotiate, or that he felt that they should go and negotiate with Apex. To me, that's Dick and Tim. And if you could cut $60,000 out of this bid, it would still be more than we have in the bank. We have $222,000 in the bank.
266, according to Steve.
Steve's on our reserves. Yeah.
Okay, well, if you got it down to 210, 220, rather than paying the DEP $10,000 fines for violations, it might almost seem worthwhile to take it and get it done. On the other hand, I very much like talking to Farley's, if we're going to negotiate with Apex, we need to do that in the next week. And we need to be probably at the same time considering talking to Farley and saying, can you do all the site work and act as general contractor for the rest of the building? Basically sub out the rest of the building if you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself. And that's my logic. I don't know whether it's worth anything.
Well, Mike had his hand up. I'd be interested in his.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's a good idea. I think.
Talking to Farley?
Yeah, because I think, and I'm going to share my screen one more time here. Go back to that list for a second, if I can find it. And because, where did it go? I lost it. Oh, there it is. Because if we look at this and we start looking at what are the things that bread and butter for Farley, right? If we look at that and we say, okay, well, this 45K in site work, I'm convinced some of that is already covered in Farley's other contract. So,
Me too.
getting a price from Farley to do the site work, the precast top, okay, the demo of the existing and the fill, because he's already got all the stuff there, right? And then the temporary ops, I would argue that the general requirement number goes down now because he doesn't need all this heavy equipment on site anymore because Farley has it all there already. So if you could cut out some of those things and then go back to Apex for everything else, maybe that would be a good idea. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with Mike that talking with Farley is an appropriate first step, particularly because we have such a good working relationship with them. We trust them. I think it's human nature for Apex to defend its bid, not retreat from its bid by 30 to 40%, which is what we'd be looking for them to do. They're going to rationalize those numbers. They're not going to say, oops, that's right. I thought that perhaps we could say you meant 6,500 for electric, not 65,000, right? But Tim says, no. So that number's so crazy that I really thought it was a typo.
There's a panel, there's a generator, there are a number of things in there. So it can't be 10% of it, but it could be, 1/3 of it, but it couldn't be 10%.
Right.
So, but I mean, I think that if Tim has a good relationship with Apex, they probably might tell him, well, we bid it based on the amount of work we have right now. And that's what we're willing to do this job for. And that's not an unreasonable thing for a contractor to do when times are good, to say, this is my cost for this. And you might be able to get him down some, but we'll see.
So who are we going to ask to talk with Farley? Tim?
Yes.
Tim and Dick. Billy has a good relationship with them. And Billy's already spoken with them about this. And they did say they weren't interested. They're not building contractors, but.
Right. And I would suggest, oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I was repeating myself.
I would suggest that you talk to Mike Sabatini too about the seawall and find out exactly what he has in the site that Farley already bid on. Because I believe Farley might be a little bit of double dipping here.
Yeah.
In the sense of what he was asked to put in for the bid and what he agreed to in the contract already. So I think if we clarified that, that might help right off the bat get the number from Farley down from that, whatever it is. It's 70 just for those two you add in the demo and those other things. That's another 20.
Right. And
so that's almost like 100,000 of it right there. So
Yeah.
if we could take that 100,000 and chop off 30 grand there and then negotiate with Apex, maybe we can just get it done.
Right. Maybe what we do is 2 contracts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or could we might even be able to do it as an addendum to the seawall? I don't know. Even though it would be paid separately. I don't know.
Maybe.
So Dick and I will have a conversation with Apex, or I'll start, I guess, with a negotiation with them. Can you give me a target we want to try to get to?
A dollar target or a date target?
Well, a dollar target, I guess. We want to
Right.
get, if we get Apex to 230, no go. We get them to 220, we go. Is there a number?
210. What do you think?
I'm saying, I'd say if you get, well, I'd say if you could get it for 200, I'd feel great. 210, I could live with it. I don't think you're gonna, I just don't think that they're gonna give you that.
No, they're
Well,
not,
but
they're
we're
not going
making
to
the
without us.
building a foot shorter, so we're gonna save $100,000 right there. That was a joke. Thank you, Billy. You understood it.
Okay, the target's 200.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is always the high end of what we thought we were working with in any event. I mean, we thought we were being very, you know, realistic when we said 160 to 200.
Well, we should do that within the next week or so, and then
Yeah, because they're looking for a
And then move on.
reaction.
Yep.
Should we schedule, normally we wouldn't have a meeting until, I think our meeting's the 11th or so. Does anyone know? Can we get a report back from Dick and Tim and then schedule one of these? Presuming that we're still doing Zoom meetings, that we're still in a pandemic. Our next meeting's the 12th. If we could,
I think we'll still be in a pandemic then, unfortunately.
well, we are under the state's orders, so, but maybe if we could hear back concretely, something from Tim and Dick by the week of the 18th so that we can meet on Friday the 22nd.
I would like that.
I think that we need to keep showing forward progress. And there's
So-
nothing more fun than sitting in these meetings.
What would that be? More fun.
David, do you see Michael's hand up?
No, I was looking at my calendar. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, Mike.
So is the approach to first negotiate with Apex on the whole thing and see if we can get it down to under 200 and then talk to Farley? Or, because it seems like if you talk to Farley at the same time, Farley might not want to do the whole project because he doesn't want to, you know, get into fighting with, you know, issues with somebody that he deals with all the time on other bids.
Mhm.
So would it make sense to try to get as far as we could with Apex and then go to Farley and say, do you want to do the bread and butter stuff, or would you do the whole thing, you know, with the overhead and profit going to you type of thing? I don't know.
Right. I like that. I think that the relationships are important things to keep in mind, and we don't want to be playing them off one another.
I would think that you ought to be able to you're going to be able to talk to Apex by Monday. I would think even if they have to look at it and consider it, that you ought to be able to have an answer a week from today from Apex. After which you could talk to Farley as need be. Is that unreasonable?
Right.
That's reasonable. Yeah.
Right. That way we'll still have a report from Dick and Tim the week of the 18th to discuss concretely in an open meeting on the 22nd.
So in conclusion, what are we trying to get it down to? Just whatever we can, or is that, I mean, it seems, go ahead.
I would say we're trying to find a plan to get this building built, which involves identifying a contractor who's going to do it. And if Apex is not going to be that contractor or won't lower their bid to within what we think to be a reasonable range, that we, at that point, approach Farley and say, how much of this are you willing to do? And would you sub the rest? Does that make sense?
What I'd like to do is negotiate with Apex to try with a 200,000 target.
Yeah.
And I don't see us getting there, But when we get to whatever number we get to, it'd be nice if we could then say, okay, you know, we go back and see the sales manager at the car dealer, and he either, you know, he says, well, maybe we can live with that or not. So we'll just have to come back and say, okay, sorry, we're not gonna work with you. We're gonna work with someone else.
Mhm.
So we may get to a point with Apex, if we get Apex down to, I don't know, 218.
17.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so then we come back, so you know,
Yeah.
whoever we talk to, well, you can keep the number. I don't need to know what it is, and then you just say yes or no.
How long are these bids good for, in general, Tim?
We had 60 or 90. Let me look real
Yeah,
quick
it was
here.
said it on the document.
I
We
couldn't
had to
remember.
hold it open for either 60 or 90. We might have made it 90. I can find it real quick here. Yeah, we said 60 days.
60 days, so that,
Yeah. Well, 14 of them are gone.
Yeah, so we're in good shape.
You know, and they can always, I mean, if they want the job, they'll always agree to extend that. But, you know, they don't have an obligation beyond 60 days.
Mhm. Are we holding any type of bid bond from them or anything?
Yes, we are. But of course, if you come back and offer them, instead of their price, you offer them $250,
Yeah, that goes away.
they
Yeah.
can walk away.
Okay.
So
I'm clear on what I'm supposed to do for the next 2 weeks. Or it won't take, you know,
Yeah, you don't have to spend the full 2
No,
weeks doing
right.
it, Tim.
we won't, but, you know.
You might have
so-
other work you can turn to.
So the 22nd, you're gonna have another Zoom meeting. Let me
Yeah.
Look at my calendar, on my real computer. I don't think there's anything that day. So that's the plan, 2:30 on the 22nd?
Yep.
Okay.
So is there more for us to do today then? One of the things you have to do, Tim, is shorten the building.
Yep, 7 foot, yep. So I'll back out then if you're done with me.
Yep, I think,
May I ask a question? This is Dan. Can anybody hear me
yes, we can hear you.
before Tim leaves? I have my hand up, but is it okay for me to speak?
David?
sure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Tim, just before you leave, I've been listening to this whole discussion, and I'm so glad that you're all reevaluating this, because I thought all those prices were outrageous. I mean, 25,000 of concrete for a 108 square foot building is just crazy. But I wanted to address two things. One, I think Tim said that just because the bid came in higher isn't a good enough reason to go back to DEP. We're in pretty unprecedented times here, and I would think that alone would cause them to be sympathetic in a lot of regards to our request. So I think you're going to go back and ask them in parallel with this other process of trying to get a better bid. The second question I had was, I didn't hear a discussion about why others didn't bid, and maybe we don't find that out, but it would seem to me that it would be logical to go and ask them why they didn't bid. I remember at the last meeting, Mike making the point that it was a very quick turnaround that we were giving the bidders. And I'm just wondering if they had another 30 days or 45 days, if we might get better bids. So that was my main question, that latter one, about why didn't others bid? I heard you say that they're busy, but did we actually go back to those 6 or 7 bidders and specifically ask them why'd you ignore us?
We didn't. I can ask a couple of them. You know, if they can give me a good reason why they didn't bother to price the job. You know, the amount of time it takes to bid a job, you can. This is just my opinion, but you can give somebody 6 weeks to bid the job, and you don't get a phone call from them until 3 days before the bids are due. So you know work expands to fill the time allotted to it. So they just leave it until the last minute. No phone calls until they're calling up 2 hours before bids are due and asking a question.
Understood. If you happen to hit them at just the wrong time as they're gearing up for their spring work,
Right.
and people said, oh, I just don't have time for these, whatever it was, 18 days they had. I forget what Mike said at that point in time. It just seems like it'd be very prudent to follow up with them and find out why they didn't respond. And if it was just a matter of time, maybe we give some more time or we put it out to bid again.
Judy?
Thank
I
you.
know that as to Farley, that because of our relationship with them, we are mindful that they had already told Billy that they weren't interested in a building, and they figured out the way to be part of the project by becoming subs. So that's why they didn't. It'd be great if you would follow up, Tim, but I know from my experience that, yeah, the bid comes in on the last day, whether you give them 90 days or 20 days.
Craig has his hand up. Craig? Gotta unmute. Gotta unmute. We can't hear you.
Okay, there I am. Sorry about that. I guess this is the public comment period. And I'll start out with saying that I don't know if any of you know that I am a retired electrical contractor. And so I would I'd like to say that indeed that 65,000 is ludicrous, adding fuel to the fire here. I also want to say my phone is running low on battery, so I may lose you all very quickly. And secondly, I agree with Dan's. I'm not sure that a lot of contractors had the time that they might be willing to put into bidding this small project. And thirdly, I would suggest that perhaps you might consider putting out to a public bid rather than individual contractors. You might then get a better response. And as Dan said, give people some time to do it. The timing of sending this bid out might have been perhaps the worst time of year because all the other projects are coming out to bid for the summer project. That's about it for now before my phone runs out. Thank you very much for listening.
Judy?
I just want to make clear that the bid is a public bid. I think that Craig may be confusing public bids with published bids. This bid was specifically sent out to 6 or 7 different people and also put on the contractors' consortiums. So they are public bids. It wasn't that we just, contacted the guy who always paints my house and says, do you want to paint my house?
Right, so effectively it went to Dun & Bradstreet or whomever, and it was out for the public to look at. For anybody could have bid on this. Is that what you're saying?
Right, it was put in construction summary and
okay. All right.
et cetera.
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much.
Okay, do we have other business?
Move to adjourn.
Zoom meeting on the 22nd, Nina?
May. Well, our next meeting's May 22nd.
Yeah.
And then there's June. Okay.
When you get done with your notes, is it, this may be me not knowing how to deal with a PDA or PDF or whatever it is, but is there any way to get it as a Word document so that I can modify it?
The easiest way to do it is just to email me your notes and then I'll amend them.
Okay.
Yep. So once you get the PDF, if you start writing an email and just say, in this spot, or you can handwrite on it too.
Okay. I'll work on that anyway. It's just always a question of how you. Sometimes it's just one word or two that make something more clear. It's interesting. Mike Lannon's background. The park is left for right flipped, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
exactly.
left for right flipped.
Yeah.
Zoom looks at us all in a mirror.
Yeah.
So you're seeing it the other way around?
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
seeing Park Row. Park Row is on South Shore.
Oh, well, I was seeing it that way, so I mirrored it so that I mirrored it. Because that was interesting earlier, David, when you put up the model and you said it was backwards, we were seeing it the right way. So I should unmirror it so that I see it mirrored and everybody else sees it normal.
Okay.
Next meeting, Sunday.
See y'all. Have a good weekend.
All
Happy
right.
Mother's Day.
Can we vote to adjourn? All in favor of adjourning? Thank you all. That was a
Hi, Kitty.
useful meeting.
Thank you.
It was a very useful meeting.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.